Welcome to Eric's Chase Grid Talk. Today is episode number 11, and I'm uploading this a day early. I usually upload these on Monday, but I'm uploading it today on Sunday for two reasons. One, because it was a Saturday night race yesterday, so might as well. I mean, usually it'd be Sunday afternoon. I'd have other things I needed to do before school, but since it's still Sunday afternoon, I'm actually recording this Saturday night. It's about 11 o'clock Central Time right now, a good hour or so since the race ended and all the extracurricular activities that happened after the race. Because let's be honest right here, this race here, race number 5 of the Chase from Charlotte, was quite a boring race in a lot of ways. Very few lead changes. I mean, you saw Kevin Harvick, Jeff Gordon, the usual crowd leading this thing. And of course, if you're a Harvick or Gordon fan, you're loving it. Especially if you're a Harvick fan, as he got his third win of the season, his first one in quite a while. But if you weren't a fan of those drivers, especially if you were a Junior fan, a Johnson fan, a Kane fan, a Keselowski fan, a Kenseth fan, any of those guys, you were not enjoying this race much at all. And there's not a lot to talk about that happened during the race other than Dale Earnhardt Jr., one of a couple guys, Jimmy Johnson, Brad Keselowski, and Dale Jr., and Casey Kane, but mostly the other three, needed to have good runs today. And unfortunately, none of them did. They all finished outside the top 15. Keselowski finished 16th, Johnson 17th, both of which ran a little bit better than that most of the race, but they had problems on the final restart, and pit road strategy didn't work their way. Dale Jr. Was running up top 10 early in the race, but he had a problem. Similar to what happened to Johnson earlier this year in Michigan, where his gear shifter broke, and they had to work on that a lot off and on throughout the whole night. They weren't ever really able to get 100% fixed, and he ended up finishing the race a lap down. So really a tough break for him, and all three of those drivers really is. Basically now, as we head into Talladega, they're basically all facing elimination at this point. It's basically going to take a win for any of them to advance, and that's a tough situation, especially for all three of those guys. All three of them really, first half of the year, were top championship contenders, and even heading into the Chase, I think most people had all three of those guys in their final 4, or at least in the final 8 for sure. And the fact that now all three of them face elimination, there's a very good chance that none of them will move on and that they'll all get eliminated. It's hard to take in. It's the glory, it's the great things, but also kind of the negatives about this new Chase, is that it allows for wild card drivers to get in, to advance, and surprises to happen, but it also kind of keeps the consistently best drivers from advancing just because they have one or two bad races. So it's tough luck for them, but I'm not going to completely say. Last week, I feel like all three of these drivers had problems that were somewhat out of their control, especially Johnson. He got turned by Biffle. That was not Johnson's fault. Tough. It put him in a big hole, and it really wasn't his fault. That's too bad. Keselowski and Jr. had tire issues. That's partially their fault, but at the same time, they weren't the only ones having tire issues. That was just a general problem last weekend. This weekend, however, pretty much all of these guys' problems were self-inflicted. Dale Earnhardt Jr., yeah, I mean, you could say the gear shifter's kind of bad luck, but it happened to Hendrick Motorsports earlier this season, so it's the kind of thing that, you can't have parts fail like that. So I'm not going to say, I'll say it wasn't Junior's fault, I don't think, but it was definitely Hendrick Motorsports kind of had a little problem there. Jimmy Johnson, his biggest problem was that his car just wasn't very good for most of the night. He had been able to sneak into the top 10, but on the final pit stop, or final caution was just a few laps to go, they decided to pit, and that put him back in, I think, 10th on the final restart, whereas he had been running up closer to 5th. And on the final restart, just a bunch of craziness. 3 and 4 wide happened, and he didn't. Unfortunately, his lane just wasn't going, and he fell back and finished 17th. So another one. It was self-inflicted in a lot of ways. Brad Keselowski had his problem. He was also off and on. It looked like he had a good car. Sometimes didn't look like it was so great. Generally, was running around 5th place. And then at one point, he stayed out on a restart or under a caution. He stayed out with about, I want to say 63 laps to go. Might have been more. No, I think it was right around there. He stayed out and assumed the lead. A couple other guys took 2 tires, so it kind of put a little cushion between him and the 4-tire guys. But on the restart, Keselowski didn't get going very well. Matt Kenseth moved up, tried to put his nose in there, tried to make it 3 wide. Keselowski moved up, and both of them hit the wall. That screwed up both of their nights and caused some rather fun excitement after the race. I'll get to that in a minute. So that hurt Keselowski, and from there they weren't able to recover really. It damaged the car just enough. He lost enough track position due to the no tires call and everything. And also on the last restart, him and Denny Hamlin had some problems. Like I said, I'll get to that at the end. So Keselowski didn't get the finish that he necessarily wanted, but again, it was self-inflicted, really. It was something he could have avoided. And still a tough break for all three of those guys, like I said. Casey Kane was the other guy I mentioned. He scrapped through and actually got a decent finish tonight despite not having the best car. So he, at this point, is actually in the chase. If you look at the 8 people cut off, he's 8th place. He's 1 point into the good. The 4 guys that are currently on the bubble are still Johnson, Keselowski, and Jr., who are really in a big hole. And then Matt Kenseth is the 9th place guy, but he's only 1 point out, so he's still on that bubble. He just needs a good run at Talladega, and he can probably advance. But that's how a lot of people are going to be looking at it. With Talladega looming, anyone can win there, and I guess that's good news for some guys. I guess Johnson, Keselowski, and Jr., they're usually good at most tracks, so I don't know, actually might be a slight disadvantage for them because usually they'd have the best car anyways, and now everyone else is going to have good cars too. So it's a race that is hard to circle on your calendar and say that, yeah, we can win this race, because so many people have the opportunity to win. It's going to be so hard to just – you can show up with the best car and easily finish 38th, just be out with something happening out of your control. Big wreck, anything like that. And it's going to be tough for those 3 drivers to get a win because basically that's pretty much what they need. It's going to be hard for them to get in on points. Not impossible, but unlikely. Let me put it that way. So that's basically the recap of the race. Harvick dominated the second half of the race, won his 3rd race of the year. Another good show for him. So him and Joey Logano are now moved on to the next round. The other 6 spots here before the cutoff are still up in the air, and very much up in the air. Guys like Jeff Gordon seem pretty locked in, or even Edwards and Newman have gotten pretty good finishes these last 2 weeks, finished top 10 both times, so they look pretty solidly in, but nobody's solidly enough in yet, with the exception of Keselowski, or with the exception of Logano and Harvick, the only ones that are secured. Everyone else still, you get wrecked at Talladega next week, and there's a very good chance that you will not advance, despite how well you've run these last couple weeks. So it's going to be an exciting race at Talladega. Sorry. I need to take, hold on, let me take one more. Need to take a couple really good sips of water, because these next 10 minutes or so, I don't know how long I'm going to spend on this. This is where the excitement happened. You heard what I said. The general race, not a lot happened. We saw very few chasers have major issues other than Dale Jr. All the excitement came after the race when 3 chasers, Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, and Matt Kenseth, had a lot of activity on the pit road and during the cool down lap at the very end, at the end of the race when it was over. I guess we should just start at the beginning. In the end, it started on that restart I talked about when Brad Keselowski. Oh, actually, here though. If you want to start at the very, very beginning, let's go back to Richmond way back in the spring when, at the end of that race, Matt Kenseth was trying to hold off Brad Keselowski. Neither of them ended up winning the race. Joey Logano snuck in and won. At that time, Brad Keselowski wasn't too thrilled with Kenseth. Kenseth wasn't too thrilled with the way Keselowski reacted. Neither driver were particularly happy with each other, but things were relatively clean at that point. Let's fast forward now to this race on that restart I mentioned earlier, where Brad Keselowski was leading, didn't get a great jump. Matt Kenseth got a huge jump from the outside of row 2. He moved up, put his nose in there, tried to make it 3 wide heading into turn 1. Keselowski moved up the racetrack into Kenseth, and both of them ended up hitting the wall. Really ended Kenseth's day, who ended up finishing 19th. Keselowski fell back and eventually would end up finishing 16th. Both drivers had pretty decent damage on their cars. Were able to run mostly full speed still, but definitely screwed them up a little bit. So Keselowski was not happy with Matt Kenseth at that point in the race, but neither driver really saw each other on the racetrack until then. Fast forward a little bit later to that final caution that came out with a little less than 10 laps to go when Brian Vickers had his issue, and that caused the caution. Under the yellow flag, Matt Kenseth was the free pass as he was going by. He drove up near Brad Keselowski's car. Keselowski did not like that. Kenseth was using his way of kind of expressing his displeasure with Keselowski for running him out into the wall on a previous restart. And so nothing happened there. I mean, nothing serious happened there, so they went on their way. Restart happens, and during the restart, Denny Hamlin and Keselowski kind of put each other in a lot of bad spots. Keselowski lost a lot of spots on that restart, so he was not happy with Denny Hamlin. And that's basically what leads to after the race. They cross the finish line, they head down, they start slowing down, they head to 1 and 2, and down the backstretch and turning into turn 3, still going half speed or whatever because they're slowing it down. Brad Keselowski basically swings at Denny Hamlin's car, clips his left rear just a little bit. Keselowski honestly probably got the worst of it. Denny Hamlin was not happy about that, but he kind of pulled on a pit road. This all happened at the very beginning when they were pulling into turn 3 and 4. And then as they came out of 4 and started pulling onto pit road, Keselowski then decided to get mad at Matt Kenseth, and he drove up and rammed into the side of Kenseth's 20 car. Kenseth was not happy on the radio as he voiced his displeasure with Brad Keselowski because Kenseth had taken his seatbelt and Hans device off. He was not happy that Keselowski chose to run into him going in his interview. He said 50 miles an hour. So he was not happy with Brad Keselowski. At the same time, Keselowski made the slight mistake of, as he hit Matt Kenseth, he ran into the back of Tony Stewart's car just a little bit. And Stewart, he is not exactly a tolerable man of such shenanigans. So he decided to jam the car into reverse and ram into the back of Keselowski's car, completely trashing the front end of that 2 car, which I found somewhat amusing. But I know a lot of people probably thought was somewhat uncalled for. After the race, Keselowski and Hamlin pulled up next to each other. Both them and their crew members exchanged some heated words. Clearly, Denny Hamlin was not happy with Brad Keselowski mainly for trying to wreck him under the cooldown lap. That was basically what Hamlin wasn't happy about. Keselowski still wasn't happy with Hamlin for whatever little thing they got into on the restart there at the end of the race. Neither were happy, but they eventually somewhat disbanded. Then, as Brad Keselowski was headed to his hauler at the end of all this craziness, Matt Kenseth decided to jump into the fray. And as a Matt Kenseth fan, I can tell you, I've never seen Matt Kenseth as heated as he was right there. They got into a little bit of a fight there between the 2 haulers. Both Keselowski's crew got to them first, got Kenseth out of the way. Kenseth's crew came in, they both split up. And neither driver, both times, that was the most intense I've seen Matt Kenseth in my entire 8-9 years of watching NASCAR. And I have to say, I was in awe watching the whole thing unfold. I've heard Kenseth get mad over the radio before. I've heard him, point at people. I remember at Bristol a few years ago, him and Jeff Gordon. It wasn't Kenseth that threw the punch. It was Jeff Gordon that gave him the shove. I've never seen anything like that. And to see Matt Kenseth and go at Brad Keselowski like that, I had to say brought a small grin to my face because you guys have heard in the past, I'm not a Brad Keselowski fan. Part of it is for things that he does like this, but tonight, this run that he had here at Charlotte, the final few laps were not some of his shining moments, I must say. So after they split up, Keselowski and Kenseth, things pretty much cooled down. Crew members were still jawing a little bit, but nobody was throwing punches anymore. And afterwards, they all 3 sides, Hamlin, Kenseth, and Keselowski, all gave their sides of the story. Both Kenseth's and Hamlin's, I encourage you, if you have not watched, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, I feel like I'm not able to describe it well enough on a listening medium. I encourage you to go watch, there's got to be highlights. I'm uploading this on Sunday, so there's got to be highlights by now on ESPN or NASCAR.com or things of the whole altercation. I encourage you to at least go watch it when you're done, either right now, but then please come back to this because I'd like you to listen to this too. But I encourage you to at least check it out before some time here, just so you can kind of get your own opinion, because I don't want to have to read a whole bunch of comments from people that haven't actually seen the whole thing. I don't want to hear people's opinions when they don't even have the full story. I'm not saying I necessarily have the 100% full story. Obviously, I wasn't in the cockpit. I don't know what everyone was thinking at the time. But from what I saw, because I saw all the replays, all the things, I have my own opinions, and I'm sure anyone that watches that will have their opinions as well. A lot of people are talking about whether or not there'll be fines, any potential suspensions. I don't think there'll be any suspensions. Nobody did anything that reckless. It's not like Kyle Busch a couple years ago at Texas in the Truck Series when he wrecked points leader at the time, Ron Hornaday, going 180 at Texas Motor Speedway. That deserved a parking from or suspension for Kyle Busch, and that's what he got. This week, there's not going to be any suspensions. Nobody did anything that egregious, but it definitely is interesting. It's clear that Matt Kenseth and Brad Keselowski do not like each other. And it's clear that Brad Keselowski has now made enemies with the entire Joe Gibbs Racing team. And heading into the chase, heading into the rest of the chase, that's not a good sign for Keselowski. That being said, Brad Keselowski's probably not going to be in the chase after next week. So, it is what it is. He doesn't have a lot to lose. I think in the end, what this all came down to is Brad Keselowski's a little bit butthurt about probably not advancing. He knows he's back far enough that he's basically got to go out and win at Talladega next weekend, and he knows how difficult that's going to be. He knows that it's possible, but that there's really not a very good chance of that happening. And so I think he was just frustrated because he felt like he was early in the race, so he thought he was in the lead, thought, oh yeah, I got a top 5 car. Then he and Kenseth made contact, and he blamed Kenseth for it, and all sorts of deals happened. And then on the final restart, he still thought he had a good top 10 run going for him, or possibly even top 5. and then he got shuffled out of line and had just crazy stuff happen on the restart and finished 16th, and he's not happy about that. And that's what it came down to. He was unhappy coming down after the checkered flag. He ran into Denny Hamlin because he had nobody else to blame in this case. He can't yell at his crew chief. Wasn't his fault. He can't yell at his spotter. Wasn't his fault. He can't yell at himself because he's too prideful for that. Brad Keselowski had to take his anger on somebody, so he chose Denny Hamlin and Matt Kenseth, and unfortunately got Tony Stewart involved as well. So that being said, I look at this and I see that people were talking. I was listening to ESPN. They had Ricky Craven, who I don't really like Ricky Craven at all. I don't agree with some of the stuff he says. I feel like it's just kind of just obvious, or it's just kind of ridiculous. Sometimes he says good stuff, but you know what I mean. But I heard him talking about like who's going to be getting a fine and stuff like that. And he said he thought Tony Stewart was definitely going to get a fine, but that he didn't think anything that Keselowski or Kenseth did was really like egregious enough to cause a fine to come their way. And I was kind of I was listening and I was like, what did Tony Stewart do? I mean, this is Tony. You got to remember, this is Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart, he doesn't like it when people mess with him or do stuff stupid. When he sees Brad Keselowski acting like a child out there on the racetrack after the race, and then during Brad Keselowski's childness gets Tony Stewart's car damaged, Stewart's not happy about that. Let me tell you right now. Nobody would be happy about it. Tony Stewart's going to let you know that he's not happy about it. So when Tony Stewart jammed that thing in reverse and drove into the front, I guess, of Brad Keselowski's car, I had a smile on my face. Ricky Craven, I don't know why he was so mad at Stewart, or what he thought was so bad about what Stewart did. I thought it was pretty ridiculous. The only guys that I can see Stewart possibly getting a fine, or at least maybe like put on probation by NASCAR, like don't do anything again, Tony. You're under probation. We're gonna be watching you. I can understand that. I'm surprised Tony Stewart's not on probation all the time in NASCAR after all the things that he's been involved in. But Brad Keselowski and Matt Kenseth both gonna get fined. I personally believe, and that's not just because I'm a Matt Kenseth fan, but Brad Keselowski should get a relatively hefty fine in the end. Because what he did, here's what I see Matt Kenseth doing. This is the only thing I saw Matt Kenseth do, was him basically charge at and basically put Brad Keselowski in an arm bar in the garage area. That's all I saw Kenseth do. What I saw Brad Keselowski do was wreck Matt Kenseth when they're racing for the lead. Because that race, Keselowski was saying it was an accident. Yeah, maybe it was an accident, but it was still his fault. All I saw was him put Kenseth in the wall. Then I saw him get mad at Denny Hamlin, try to spin Hamlin out after the race. And then I saw him ram into the back of Kenseth's car, who was already slowed down on pit road and had his seatbelt and helmet off. And then I saw Brad Keselowski go ahead and get in an altercation with Denny Hamlin and his crew members. Keselowski, and from other reports, I heard that Keselowski was acting kind of crazy in the garage area as well, was kind of being a little wild, being more nutty than he probably should have been. And with all that, and honestly with some of Keselowski's previous stuff, I'd hope NASCAR, if they don't fine Keselowski, they better not fine Matt Kenseth. And if they do fine Matt Kenseth, they better fine Brad Keselowski at least just as much. I don't think anyone should be suspended from this race. Like I said, nobody did anything bad enough that there should be like big suspensions coming down, like you guys will not race at Talladega. But because that would just be terrible for NASCAR to put like Kenseth and Keselowski or Stewart or any of those guys out of the seat just because of what happened this weekend. This isn't that bad. But that's what I just wanted to say. And I know a lot of you guys have different opinions. I know some of you guys are Brad Keselowski fans, but I hope even if you're a Brad Keselowski fan, you look at what he did tonight and say, yeah, that was a little uncalled for. I'm sitting here as a Matt Kenseth fan, and yeah, I was cheering him on when he charged at Brad Keselowski and got him in a headlock or in an arm lock, whatever. I don't even know the fighting terms, but had him held up there. I was cheering for Matt Kenseth. I was saying go, 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 because two reasons. One, Matt Kenseth is never that pronounced with his unhappiness, so I thought that was pretty amusing. And two, I felt like Brad Keselowski deserved it after the way he basically ended Kenseth's chances at a good finish. And this is coming from a Matt Kenseth fan. Don't get me wrong. I am slightly biased, but at the same time, I feel like I am also mostly right in this situation. That Brad Keselowski was most at fault, and he overreacted to everything, and he acted somewhat childish. Mainly because I think he's a little butthurt that he knows he's probably not going to advance, despite having the consistently best car pretty much all season long. So that's the end of this video. This is the first race of the chase. We'll have to make it halfway through. I knew there had to be at least one video where I got mad at somebody or somebody gave me a controversial thing to talk about. I was worried this was going to be a boring series of videos, but thank you, Brad Keselowski, for making this an entertaining series. I'll be back. I'll be uploading my next race on video, or not race, sorry, my next Chase Grid Talk on Thursday, in which I'll be answering your questions. Please leave your comments or questions in the comment section below. Even if it's not a question, If it's just a comment, something you want to voice your opinion on, I'll gladly debate with you in the comments. I'll do my best to, you know, be fair and think about, you know, I'm trying to stay level-headed here. Give me a night to sleep on it. Like I said, I'm recording this just after the race, so I'm definitely a little, you know, it's on the top of my brain right now. Tomorrow morning, or I guess in your case today, probably a little bit more calm about it, and I'll talk about it in a very gentle way. So that's all I have for this video. I'll see you guys on Thursday. That's all. Bye.